Okay, so I want to quick show you the differences and what different sources will give you for the main causes of the Civil War. And so some of these kind of go along with what we talked about. Some of them are slightly different. If you look at this table, um, thinglink.com, um, arguments between free states and slave states about the power of national government to prohibit slavery. So that's part of the slavery argument. Can the federal government ban slavery or can't they? So that's an argument between the two sides. The Dred Scott decision, which we talked about already, the slave that had lived in a free territory but was denied his freedom because he was black and he had no civil rights at all in this country. Number three, economic and social differences. This is what we put on our sectionalism posters. This was a cause of the war. There's so many different belief systems going on in our country between North and South and even the West. So that's going to be a cause. Cause number four, territorial expansion. Both North and South want to expand westward, and the South wants to bring slavery with them, and the North wants it to stop. Number five, we've got the literature that we talked about. Harriet Beecher Stowe's book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, was published and created this big anti slavery movement across the country. And then we also looked at a couple of the newspapers that were being circulated too, like the North Star. Now, number six, Missouri Compromise. We got that too. That we were looking at how slavery would expand to the West, and the Missouri Compromise drew the line that created even more conflict. When you look at these, here we go, economy, what the two sides base their economies on. States' rights versus federal rights, same thing. Slavery, this really broad category that includes lots of different disagreements. And then this one even adds the election of Abraham Lincoln. So Lincoln gets elected, and that's going to cause problems. And then over here, some of the same ones: slavery, tariffs, the taxes that were placed on the South when they traded with Great Britain, states' rights, the economies, again, the culture, how different their beliefs were. So it says here, notice the three charts show slightly different ways of explaining the causes. When you look at them, there are very similar ideas here, but slightly focused on different things. Now, we started watching the video. I wanted you to notice that you have a timeline of things that are happening. The Missouri Compromise in 1820, the Tariff of Abominations, 1828. Now you can see when these books were published and when the newspapers were coming out. The Fugitive Slave Law was part of the Compromise of 1850. Okay, there's Uncle Tom's Cabin. The Kansas Nebraska Act, and that's when John Brown's raid happened. And you have a movie connection to make for that. So you're going to want to copy this down. John Brown's raid is the reason for his arrest and trial at the start of the movie. Okay, the raid on Harper's Ferry is the last thing on our timeline on this page. So you might want to pause the screencast and write down the video connection. Okay, now the blue and the gray, the video answers. So far, this was all from the first part of the movie. Where does John Geyser live? A farm near Charlottesville, Virginia. Okay. When we did a class pyramid in our South notes, we looked at different levels in society of how wealthy or how important people were in Southern society. The planters were the big plantation owners. Clearly, John's family does not own a big plantation with 20 or more slaves. John's family has a slave, one. They almost treat her somewhat like a family member. I wouldn't say that that's exactly it. You also got to meet Jonathan. Jonathan is a free man. He is African American. He is free, and he rents a home from John's family, a cabin. And so he's part of the free African Americans at the bottom of that pyramid right above slaves. Now, who is John's family? They're not poor. That makes them, by default here, yeoman farmers, those who own small farms and work the land mostly themselves. Okay? And they might own a slave or two, like John's family. Okay, so where does John go to take a job as a newspaper artist for his uncle? He goes to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. You have heard of Gettysburg before, I'm sure. And so you probably can tell that at some point in the future we're going to be hearing about the Battle of Gettysburg. And then whose trial did he sketch? It was John Brown's trial. A lot of things about John Brown's trial. When you watch the movie, you probably noticed that he had a cot in the trial. John Brown was injured so severely when he was captured in the raid. Trying to steal those weapons, that he had to spend a lot of his trial lying down on a cot because he was so weak. And so it doesn't really show that real well in the movie, but that's why there's a cot there. That's why he's wearing slippers and things like that. He was very, very, very ill at that point. Okay, so what else are we looking at here? John's sister Emma, she's going to get married and she moves to Vicksburg, Mississippi, right on the Mississippi River. Her husband is a trader, not traitor, but he trades goods on the Mississippi. And so he has a boat that he ships things back and forth up and down the Mississippi River. He has his own steamboat company. So he's a fairly wealthy person, and he's a little bit worried at one point. You could tell that if he brings Emma back to Mississippi, that it might not be safe. And she's saying, yeah, but we might make a lot of money trading if there is a war. And so her husband's a little worried, and she convinces him that it'll be okay to go there. Vicksburg, there will be a major battle at Vicksburg. So you can see that that's coming up too. Why does Jonathan, a free man, have no right to a trial when he is caught helping escaped slaves? After Nat Turner's rebellion, all laws in Virginia regarding slaves also applied to free black people. That meant no right to a trial. Hey, his rights had been stripped because of that rebellion and because states like Virginia took their rights away. Okay. The first part of the video ends showing us the new president, Lincoln. When would he begin serving as president? 1861. And video connection. This is interesting. Lincoln's train trip did involve stops in dozens of towns. But for the last 200 miles on his way to Washington, D.C. to become the new president, they had to stop doing their visits in those towns because there were so many threats on Lincoln's life that they disguised him and they refused to stop the train for him to see anyone. So they had to keep going for his safety. Okay, you can pause if you need to copy that down right there. And I'm not going to give anything away. You're supposed to have already watched part 3 of the movie. If you haven't, this is going to be a big spoiler, so you might want to stop and watch that before you look at this. Okay, we got to part 3 where James is too young to enlist in the army. What does he do to be able to sign up without actually lying? He writes the number 18 on a piece of paper, puts it in his boot, and says, I stand on my statement when he's asked if he's over 18. And this was something that lots of young boys would do to be able to enlist in the army because they wanted to be in the military. So they were able to say, I am over 18 if the number 18 was underneath their feet. And so this was a ploy where they could argue that they hadn't officially lied when they were signing up to serve. Okay, John's friend, Jonas Steele, who is the weirdest character in the movie, he has all kinds of strange visions about seeing the future and stuff like that. He is a bodyguard for Abraham Lincoln. He says he knew Lincoln back when Lincoln was a lawyer. And so they've known each other some time, and he is now serving as a bodyguard. Um, there's all kinds of questions about why the person who made the movie, why did the writer include somebody who seems to be able to see things in his dreams, see things in the future. And I will let you in on a secret that Abraham Lincoln believed that he could see the future from his dreams. And so that could be why they thought, why don't we put a character in that sees some of the things that Lincoln claimed to have seen in his dreams? So we'll be talking about that more later. Um, what happens to James shortly after he joined the army? He dies from dysentery. And this is a disease that killed more soldiers in the Civil War than any of the battles. So, I'm sorry if you had not watched part 3 yet. You were supposed to, if I gave away some spoiler here. I'm not going to go on any further because the next question comes from part 4. And you are going to get to watch the first battle of Bull Run reenacted in the movie. So I don't want to spoil anything for you, but we'll come back to this in our next screencast or in tomorrow's Google Meet, whichever one you're able to go to.